Sands Hotel, Las Vegas, January 26, 1960, 11:37 in the morning. The film crew stood around the casino floor, cameras ready, lights positioned, everything prepared for the day's shoot. The director, Louis Milestone, a veteran filmmaker who'd won an Oscar 20 years earlier, checked his watch for the 30th time. They were supposed to start filming at 9 a.m. It was now almost noon. The stars of Ocean's 11 were nowhere to be seen. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, the 5 biggest names in entertainment, all still asleep in their suites upstairs because they'd performed 2 shows the night before, the second one not ending until 3:30 in the morning. An assistant director was sent upstairs to knock on Frank's door, once, twice. Finally, Frank's voice came through, rough with exhaustion and probably whiskey. "What time is it?" "Almost noon, Mr. Sinatra. We're supposed to be shooting." There was a long pause. Then, "Tell Milestone we'll be down in an hour." The assistant ran back downstairs. Milestone threw his clipboard onto a chair. "This is impossible. You cannot make a motion picture this way." But that's exactly what Frank Sinatra was doing, making a movie while performing 2 shows a night, 6 nights a week, filming during the day, performing in the evening, partying until dawn, then waking up and doing it all over again, for 28 days straight. Everyone said it couldn't be done. The studio executive said it, the director said it, even Dean Martin, Frank's closest friend, had his doubts. But Frank Sinatra didn't listen to people who told him what was impossible, because Frank had figured something out, something brilliant. If you made a movie in Las Vegas while simultaneously packing a casino with sold-out shows every single night, you didn't just make money from one thing, you made money from everything. The film, the performances, the publicity, the gambling. It was the perfect setup. And if anyone could pull it off, it was the Rat Pack. 5 men at the absolute peak of their powers, 5 friends who trusted each other completely, 5 entertainers who understood that sometimes the best art comes from controlled chaos. This is the story of how they made Ocean's 11, not just a movie about robbing casinos, but a film that captured lightning in a bottle, a moment in time when friendship and talent and absolute insanity combined to create something Hollywood had never seen before and would never see again. The idea for Ocean's 11 didn't start with Frank. It started with Peter Lawford, who'd heard about a treatment for a heist movie and brought it to Frank in late 1959. The concept was simple. A group of World War II veterans bored with civilian life decide to rob 5 Las Vegas casinos on New Year's Eve. Frank read it and immediately saw the potential, not just as a movie, but as something bigger, an opportunity to do what he did best, make money while having the time of his life with his friends. He called a meeting with Warner Brothers executives, laid out his vision. "Here's the deal. We make this movie in Vegas. We film during the day. And every night, my guys and I perform at the Sands. 2 shows, sold out. While we're there making your movie, we're also packing the casino." The executives looked at each other nervously. "Mr. Sinatra, that's an ambitious schedule. How will you manage both?" Frank smiled that famous smile. "I'll manage just fine. Trust me. And your co-stars, can they handle that workload? They're the Rat Pack. We can handle anything." The executives were skeptical but intrigued. Frank Sinatra's name on a picture guaranteed box office, and if he could deliver sold-out shows at the same time, the Sands would make a fortune. Warner Brothers approved a modest budget of $2.5 million. Shooting would begin in January 1960. Frank assembled his team. Dean Martin was in immediately. Dean and Frank were inseparable by this point. They understood each other. Dean provided the balance to Frank's intensity. Where Frank pushed, Dean eased. Where Frank demanded perfection, Dean reminded everyone to have fun. Sammy Davis Jr. was next. Sammy was the most talented performer in the group. He could sing, dance, do impressions, play instruments. Sammy brought energy that no one else could match. When Sammy walked into a room, the temperature rose 10 degrees from his sheer enthusiasm. Peter Lawford was essential for different reasons. Peter was married to Patricia Kennedy, sister of the soon-to-be president. Peter brought glamour and political connections. He was the bridge between Hollywood and Camelot. Joey Bishop was the wild card, quiet, observant, wickedly funny. Joey didn't need the spotlight the way the others did. He was content being the glue, the guy who could make everyone laugh when tensions ran high. Together, they were unstoppable. Dean pulled Frank aside before filming began. "Frank, you know I love you like a brother, but are you sure about this? Filming all day and performing all night for a month?" 28 days, Frank corrected. "That makes it better? It makes it achievable." "Dean, we're going to make movie history here, and we're going to have fun doing it." Dean studied his friend's face, saw the determination there, the certainty. Dean shrugged. "All right, Pally, if we're doing this, let's do it right." The first week of shooting was chaos, pure, unfiltered chaos. The Rat Pack showed up late. They improvised dialogue. They cracked jokes during serious scenes. They ignored the director's instructions. Milestone. The director was losing his mind. He'd made serious war films. He'd won an Oscar. He knew how movies were supposed to be made, with discipline, with structure, with actors who showed up on time and said their lines as written. This was nothing like that. One morning, they were filming a scene where the characters discussed the heist plan. The script had specific dialogue, technical details about the robbery. But when the camera started rolling, Frank and Dean just started talking about nothing, about golf, about women they dated, about the best place to get a drink in Vegas. Milestone yelled, "Cut! Gentlemen, that's not the scene." Frank looked at the director. "What do you mean?" "The script. You're not following the script. The script is boring. This is better, but it has nothing to do with the robbery." Dean leaned back in his chair. "Exactly. That's what makes it interesting. Real guys planning a heist wouldn't just talk about the heist. They'd talk about life, about everything else, because that's what friends do." Milestone opened his mouth to argue, then he stopped. Because Dean was right. The improvised scene felt more authentic than anything in the script. It felt like five friends hanging out, which is exactly what was happening. "Fine," Milestone said, throwing up his hands. "Keep the cameras rolling. Let them do whatever they want." That became the pattern. The script was more of a suggestion than a rule. The Rat Pack would show up, read what was supposed to happen, then do their own version of it. Sometimes it was better than the script. Sometimes it was completely off track, but it was always entertaining. The schedule was brutal. They'd film from late morning until early evening. Sometimes they'd film through the night, if they'd missed time during the day. Then they'd race upstairs to the Sands showroom. First show at 8 p.m., second show at midnight. Between shows, they'd drink, tell jokes, occasionally fight about something stupid. After the second show ended around 2 a.m., they wouldn't go to bed. They'd go to parties, sometimes in Frank's suite, sometimes at other hotels, sometimes just wandering the casino floor, gambling and telling stories until the sun came up. 3, maybe 4 hours of sleep, then back to filming. By the second week, everyone was exhausted. Sammy fell asleep during a take, his head dropping onto the table in the middle of a scene. Dean showed up to the set one morning, still wearing his tuxedo from the night before. Peter forgot his lines so completely he had to read them off cue cards held 2 feet from his face. But Frank kept driving, not cruelly, not meanly. He was tired too. They were all tired. But Frank understood something fundamental about this project. They had a tiny window to pull this off. 1 month. If they could make it work, it would be legendary. If they failed, it would be a disaster that followed them forever. "Come on, guys," Frank would say when energy flagged. "We're the Rat Pack. We can sleep when we're dead." "We might be dead by next week," Dean would mutter, but he'd get up and do another take anyway. The nightly performances were the opposite of the filming. On screen, they were playing criminals, serious guys planning a serious heist, but on stage they were pure joy. The shows were loose, improvised, hilarious. Frank would sing. Dean would wander on with a drink and interrupt. Sammy would do an impression of both of them. The audience loved every second. Word spread across Las Vegas. The Rat Pack was filming a movie by day and performing by night. The shows sold out instantly. People flew in from across the country just to see them. The Sands made more money in those 28 days than any 4-week period in its history. By the third week, something started happening. The exhaustion, the lack of sleep, the constant performing, it created a kind of delirium. But instead of making them worse, it made them better. The boundaries between the movie and real life blurred. When they filmed scenes together, they weren't acting anymore. They were just being themselves. The friendship on screen was completely real because it was their actual friendship. Milestone noticed it. Despite his frustrations, despite the chaos, despite everything going wrong according to traditional filmmaking rules, something magical was happening. The footage was good, really good. The chemistry between the five leads was electric because it was genuine. One night after filming, Milestone pulled Frank aside. "I have to admit something. When we started this, I thought it was going to be a disaster. I thought there was no way we could make a quality film under these conditions. And now," Milestone smiled, "now I think we're making something special. I don't know if it's a great film in the traditional sense, but it's capturing something real, something audiences are going to love." Frank nodded. "That's all I wanted to hear." The final week was a race to the finish line. They were behind schedule because of all the improvisation and late starts, but they were also ahead of schedule because the performances were so natural they rarely needed more than 2 or 3 takes. On the last day of filming, January 28, 1960, Frank gathered the Rat Pack in his dressing room before the final scene. They were all exhausted. Dean was lying on the couch. Sammy was doing stretches to stay awake. Peter and Joey were drinking coffee. "Gentlemen," Frank said, "we did it. 28 days, 48 shows, 1 complete motion picture. They said it was impossible, but we proved them wrong." Dean lifted his head off the couch. "We proved we're certifiably insane is what we proved." "That too," Frank agreed. "But we also proved something else. We proved that friendship and talent can accomplish anything, even something this stupid." They filmed the final scene at 6 p.m., a simple shot of the 5 of them walking away from a casino, their heist complete. It took 1 take, then it was done. They went upstairs, changed into their tuxedos, and performed their final 2 shows at the Sands. At 2:30 in the morning, when the last note was sung and the last joke told, they stood together on stage. The audience gave them a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes, not just for the performances, but because everyone in that room understood they'd witnessed something unique, a moment in time that would never be repeated. Ocean's 11 premiered in August 1960. The critics were mixed. Some loved it. Some thought it was too loose, too improvised, too much like watching friends hang out rather than a proper heist film. But audiences didn't care what critics thought. The film was a massive hit. It made over $5 million at the box office, double its budget. More importantly, it became a cultural phenomenon. Everyone wanted to be part of the Rat Pack. Everyone wanted that effortless cool, that friendship, that sense of fun. The film captured the spirit of an era. The early 1960s, before Kennedy was killed, before Vietnam, before everything got complicated and dark. Ocean's 11 was the last gasp of a simpler time, when 5 friends could rob casinos on screen and perform in them by night, and everyone thought it was the coolest thing they'd ever seen. But the real shock came decades later. In 2001, director Steven Soderbergh remade Ocean's 11 with George Clooney, Brad Pitt, and an all-star ensemble cast. The remake was slick, sophisticated, expertly crafted. It made over $400 million worldwide. It launched 2 sequels and became a franchise. But here's what shocked everyone. Despite the remake's success, despite its bigger budget and modern filmmaking techniques, the original remained special. Film scholars studied it. New generations discovered it, because the 1960 version had something the remake couldn't replicate: authentic friendship, real chemistry, the sense that you were watching 5 people who genuinely loved each other, captured at the exact moment they were at the peak of their powers. The Rat Pack never made another film together quite like Ocean's 11. They tried. They made Sergeants 3, 4 for Texas, Robin and the 7 Hoods, but none of them had the same magic. Because Ocean's 11 wasn't just a film, it was a perfect storm. The right people, the right time, the right combination of chaos and talent. Years later, Dean Martin was asked about making the film. Was it worth it? Filming all day and performing all night for a month. Dean smiled that lazy smile. "It nearly killed us. We were exhausted for months afterward. But yeah, it was worth it, because we did something nobody else could do. We made a movie that felt like a party you wanted to be invited to. And for 28 days in Las Vegas, it was exactly that." Frank Sinatra never publicly discussed the making of Ocean's 11 in detail, but in private with close friends, he'd talk about it sometimes, about how proud he was, not just of the film, but of what they'd accomplished. 5 men pushing themselves beyond reasonable limits, proving that with enough determination and friendship, you could do the impossible. The legacy of Ocean's 11 isn't just the film itself, it's what it represented. A moment when entertainment was about having fun with your friends, when movies didn't need to be taken too seriously, when the journey was more important than the destination. In Hollywood today, no one would attempt what Frank Sinatra did in 1960. Union rules wouldn't allow it, insurance wouldn't cover it, actors wouldn't agree to it, the logistics would be impossible. But that's exactly why Ocean's 11 remains special. It's a relic from an era when you could have a crazy idea, gather your best friends, and just do it. When you could rob 5 casinos on screen and perform in one casino every night. When you could sleep 3 hours and still show up and be brilliant. When you could be the Rat Pack, and when you were the Rat Pack, nothing was impossible. The final word goes to Sammy Davis Jr., who summed up the Ocean's 11 experience perfectly in an interview years later. "We didn't make a movie, we threw a party and someone happened to film it, and somehow that party became legendary." That's Ocean's 11. Not just a heist film, but a document of friendship at its finest. 5 men who trusted each other enough to attempt something insane, and pulled it off so well that people are still talking about it 60 years later. Frank Sinatra's impossible plan worked. He robbed 5 casinos on screen, performed in one casino every night, made millions of dollars, and created a film that would inspire remakes and imitators for generations. What happened next shocked everyone, because the impossible became possible. The crazy idea became reality, and the Rat Pack proved that sometimes the best way to make history is to stop worrying about what's proper and just do what's fun. That's the real heist. Not stealing money from casinos, but stealing a moment in time, capturing it on film, and making it last forever.